The fence post snapped clean in half when Zelda Ramirez tried to hammer it into the dry Utah soil, sending her stumbling backward into a patch of sagebrush that tore at her worn cotton skirt. She steadied herself with calloused hands, wiping sweat from her forehead as the midday sun beat down on the abandoned homestead she had claimed just 3 weeks prior in the summer of 1883. The land stretched endlessly around her, dotted with twisted juniper trees and rocky outcroppings, and she wondered for the 100th time if she had made the right choice leaving her aunt's crowded boarding house in Ogden to strike out on her own at 22 years old. The property had been abandoned for nearly 5 years according to the land office clerk, left behind by a family who could not coax crops from the stubborn earth and had moved on to greener prospects in California. Zelda had used every penny of her savings from working as a seamstress to purchase the 40 acres, drawn by the promise of independence, and the small cabin that still stood reasonably intact despite years of neglect. She had spent her first weeks patching the roof, scrubbing years of dust and debris from the single room, and now she was attempting to repair the fence line that marked the western boundary of her property. She bent to examine the broken post, frustration welling in her chest. The wood was older than she had realized, dry rotted from years of exposure to the harsh elements. She would need to replace nearly all the posts, not just repair them, and her limited funds were dwindling faster than she had anticipated. The nearest neighbor was supposedly miles away according to the land office records, and she had seen no one since settling in except for a distant dust cloud that might have been riders passing on the main road to the north. Zelda stood and shaded her eyes, surveying the work ahead. The fence line ran for nearly a quarter mile, and at least 24 posts needed replacing. She had purchased only 10 new posts from the lumber yard in Ogden, thinking she could salvage most of the existing structure. Her naivety about ranch work was becoming painfully apparent with each passing day. She had grown up in the city, first in Santa Fe with her parents until they died of fever when she was 14, then with her aunt in Ogden. Everything she knew about fence building came from a borrowed book and stubborn determination. The sound of hoofbeats made her turn sharply, one hand instinctively moving to the hammer hanging from her work belt. A rider approached from the west, moving at an easy canter across the open rangeland. As he drew closer, Zelda could make out a tall figure astride a paint horse, wearing a dusty brown hat and canvas work clothes. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She had no gun, no real way to defend herself if this stranger meant trouble. The rider slowed as he approached the fence line, raising one hand in a gesture of greeting. He stopped his horse a respectful distance away and pushed his hat back, revealing a sun-weathered face with striking blue eyes that seemed to assess her and the broken fence with equal interest. He appeared to be in his late 20s, with dark hair curling slightly at his collar and a few days' worth of stubble shadowing his jaw. "Afternoon, madam," he said, his voice a low rumble that carried easily in the still air. "Name's Cade Holloway. I run cattle on the property adjoining yours to the west. Saw you working out here and thought I should introduce myself." Zelda relaxed slightly but kept her stance guarded. "Zelda Ramirez, this is my land." "So I heard in town," Cade said, dismounting with fluid grace. He kept his horse's reins in one hand and approached the fence slowly, as if not wanting to spook her. "The old Morrison place. Been empty a long time." "Not anymore," Zelda said, lifting her chin. "I have the deed filed proper at the land office." "Not questioning that," Cade replied, a hint of amusement touching his weathered features. "Just making myself known. We try to be neighborly out here, seeing as how we're all pretty spread out." He looked at the broken fence post and the scattered tools around her. Having some trouble? Nothing I cannot handle, Zelda said, more sharply than she intended. She had dealt with enough men in her life who assumed a woman could not manage anything more complicated than needlework. Cade held up his free hand in a peaceful gesture. Did not mean any offense. It is just that these old posts are going to give you nothing but grief. The Morrison family used green wood when they built this fence, and it rotted from the inside out. He walked along the fence line, examining the posts with a practiced eye. You will need to replace most of them, maybe 3/4 of what is standing. Zelda felt her stomach sink. That would cost far more than she could afford. I will manage, she said again, but the words came out weaker this time. Cade turned back to her, those blue eyes studying her face. How many posts did you bring out? 10, Zelda admitted. I thought I could reinforce the others. These are beyond reinforcing, Cade said, not unkindly. He seemed to consider something for a moment, then gestured toward the west. My place is about 3 miles that way. I have got timber in my barn, probably 40 or 50 good posts I cut last fall but have not gotten around to using yet. You are welcome to them if you want. Zelda stiffened. I am not looking for charity. Not charity, Cade said mildly. Call it neighborly assistance. You can pay me back when you get established or not at all. Makes no difference to me. But winter comes hard and fast up here, and you are going to want these fences solid before the snow flies. Keeps the cattle from wandering where they should not be, and marks your property clear so there are no disputes. She studied him carefully, looking for any hint of ulterior motives or condescension. What she saw instead was genuine concern mixed with the practical sensibility of someone who understood the realities of frontier life. Still, accepting help felt like admitting defeat. Why would you help me? She asked directly. Cade considered the question. Because I remember what it was like starting out, he said finally. And because good neighbors make life easier for everyone. I have got cattle that sometimes drift this direction, and I would rather have a solid fence between our properties than spend my time chasing strays. Practical reasons, mostly. Mostly, Zelda asked, catching the qualifier. A slight smile touched his lips. And because it is the right thing to do, my mother raised me to help folks when they need it. He moved back toward his horse. I will bring a wagon load of posts by tomorrow morning if that suits you. You can decide then if you want them or not. Wait, Zelda said, surprising herself. Cade turned back, one hand on his saddle horn. She swallowed her pride, thinking of the long winter ahead and her dwindling funds. I cannot pay you right now. Did not ask you to, Cade replied. But I will, Zelda insisted. Once I get my sewing business established, I am skilled with a needle and I plan to take in mending and alteration work from town. Fair enough, Cade said. He swung into his saddle with easy strength. I will see you tomorrow then, Miss Ramirez. Early, before the heat gets too bad. He touched the brim of his hat and turned his horse west, cantering away across the open range. Zelda watched him go. Her feelings a confused tangle of relief, frustration at needing help, and something else she could not quite name. There had been nothing improper in his manner, nothing that suggested he expected anything inappropriate in return for his assistance. He had simply offered help as one neighbor to another, and she found herself grudgingly grateful despite her fierce desire for independence. That evening, as she sat outside her cabin watching the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold across the western sky, Zelda thought about Cade Holloway. She knew nothing about him beyond his name and that he raised cattle. He could be married for all she knew, though he had not mentioned a wife. Not that it mattered, she told herself firmly. She had not come out here looking for a man. She had come seeking freedom and self-sufficiency. Tired of living under her aunt's roof and following her aunt's rules. At 22, she wanted to build something of her own, to prove she could survive and thrive on her own terms. The next morning arrived cool and clear, the late summer air holding just a hint of the autumn to come. Zelda was up before dawn, heating water for coffee over her small stove and eating a simple breakfast of bread and preserves. She had just finished washing her tin cup when she heard the rattle and creak of a wagon approaching. Cade drove a sturdy farm wagon pulled by two dark bay horses, the wagon bed stacked with fence posts that had been carefully stripped and treated. He pulled up near her fence line and set the brake, climbing down with a nod of greeting. "Morning, Miss Ramirez," he called. "Brought those posts I mentioned." Zelda walked out to meet him, wiping her hands on her apron. In the clear morning light, she could see him more clearly than she had the day before. He was tall and rangy, with the lean build of someone who worked hard physically every day. His hands were strong and scarred from years of ranch work, and he moved with the confidence of a man completely comfortable in his environment. He wore the same canvas work pants and a faded blue shirt, his brown hat pulled low against the rising sun. "That is a lot of posts," Zelda said, eyeing the loaded wagon. 43 of them, Cade said. "Should be enough to replace everything along this western line and maybe part of the north if you need it." He started pulling posts from the wagon, stacking them neatly on the ground. "I brought some tools too in case you need them. Post hole digger, maul, some wire stretchers." "I have a post hole digger," Zelda said, feeling defensive again. She did have one, purchased used from a farmer selling off equipment. "Good," Cade said without any hint of condescension. "Then we can each work a post hole and get this done faster." "We?" Zelda asked sharply. Cade paused, a post balanced on his shoulder. "I figured I would help you get them in the ground. This is hard work for one person, especially in this rocky soil." "I can manage my own land," Zelda said, her pride flaring hot. Cade set the post down carefully and turned to face her fully. "Miss Ramirez, I am sure you can manage, but this job will take you 2 weeks on your own, maybe more. With 2 of us working, we can have it done in 3 or 4 days. Now, I have got time right now because my cattle are settled and my hay is cut. Come next week, I will be too busy to help even if you decided you wanted it. So you can accept assistance from a neighbor and get this fence solid before the weather turns, or you can stand on your pride and still be digging holes when the first snow comes. Your choice entirely." He delivered the words without rancor, just plain speaking fact. Zelda felt her cheeks burn but could not argue with his logic. She did need help, and turning it down out of stubbornness would be foolish. 3 or 4 days, she asked. "If we work steady, yes," Cade said. "Dawn until the heat gets too bad, then evening until dark. The middle of the day we rest unless you want to risk heat stroke." Zelda took a deep breath and nodded. "All right, thank you, but I will pay you back for all of this." "We can settle up later," Cade said easily. He pulled off his hat and ran a hand through his dark hair. "You got coffee made?" "I do," Zelda said, surprised by the question. "Then how about you bring us each a cup and we will get started," Cade said. "Going to be a long day." They fell into a rhythm quickly. Cade marked where each new post should go, spacing them evenly and taking into account the contours of the land. Zelda worked the post hole digger, finding that Cade was right about the rocky soil. It took considerable effort to dig each hole deep enough, and she was grateful for the work gloves she had purchased in town. Cade dug holes as well, and when she struggled with a particularly stubborn rock, he would come over and help lever it out without making her feel incapable. As they worked, they talked. At first, the conversation was sparse and practical, focused on the work at hand. But as the morning wore on, they began to share more. "How long have you had your ranch?" Zelda asked, pausing to wipe sweat from her forehead. 8 years now, Cade said, tamping earth around a post he had just set. Came out here when I was 21 with money I had saved from working cattle drives up from Texas. Bought government land and built up from there. Started with 50 head of cattle, now I've got close to 300. That is quite an accomplishment, Zelda said, genuinely impressed. It has been hard work, Cade admitted. First few years I did not think I would make it. Had a brutal winter in '81 that killed a quarter of my herd, but I kept at it and things have been better since. Do you run the ranch alone? Zelda asked, then immediately felt embarrassed by the transparent attempt to find out if he was married. If Cade noticed her real question, he did not show it. I've got 2 hands who work for me during busy seasons, but otherwise, yes, it is just me. I built a 4-room house 3 years back, thinking I would fill it eventually, but so far it has just been me rattling around in all that space. Not married then, Zelda thought, then wondered why that information pleased her. She focused on digging the next hole. What about you? Cade asked. What brought you out here to take on a homestead by yourself? Zelda considered how much to share. My parents died when I was young, she said finally. I lived with my aunt in Ogden after that, working as a seamstress in her shop. She is a good woman, but she has very definite ideas about how I should live my life. She wanted me to marry a banker's son who had been courting me. She drove the post hole digger into the earth with more force than necessary. He was dull as dishwater and treated me like a pretty ornament instead of a person with thoughts of my own. So you left, Cade said. So I left, Zelda confirmed. I had been saving money for years, just tucking away bits here and there. When this land came available at a price I could afford, I bought it before I could talk myself out of it. My aunt was furious. She said I was throwing away my future for foolish pride. Do you think she was right? Cade asked, genuinely curious. Zelda paused in her work and looked around at the land spreading in all directions, harsh and beautiful and hers. No, she said firmly. This may be hard, but it is mine. Every decision I make here is mine. That is worth more than security with a man who would never see me as an equal. Cade nodded slowly. I can understand that. Not the part about having to marry someone, but the wanting to build something of your own. That is why I came out here too. Did not want to spend my life working someone else's land, following someone else's orders. They worked in companionable silence for a while after that. Zelda found herself stealing glances at Cade as he worked, noting the easy strength with which he handled the heavy posts, the way he squinted against the sun, the quiet competence in everything he did. There was something deeply attractive about his self-sufficiency, and the respect he showed her capabilities even while offering help. By midday, the heat had become oppressive, and they took refuge in the shade of Zelda's cabin. She brought out bread, cheese, and cold water from her spring house, a small root cellar dug into the hillside behind the cabin that stayed cool year-round. You have got this place set up pretty well, Cade observed, eating with the appreciation of someone who worked hard physically. The Morrisons did not take much when they left. They left in a hurry, apparently, Zelda said. Or maybe they just wanted to be rid of everything that reminded them of this place. I found some furniture, a decent cook stove, even some tools in the barn. The barn is in rough shape, though, Cade said. You will want to shore up that roof before winter. I know, Zelda said, trying not to feel overwhelmed by the endless list of tasks. One thing at a time. I could help with that too, Cade offered, after we finish the fence. Zelda started to protest, then stopped herself. Why are you being so helpful? She asked instead. And do not say it is just being neighborly. You are spending days of your time helping someone you just met. Cade was quiet for a moment, turning his tin cup in his hands. Honest answer, he asked. Honest answer, Zelda confirmed. Because I like you, Cade said simply, meeting her eyes. You have got grit and determination, and you are not afraid of hard work. Those are qualities I admire. And because I know what it is like to be alone out here, and I remember wishing I had someone to lend a hand when I was starting out. He paused. And because I find you interesting. You are educated, you speak your mind, and you are doing something most men would not even attempt. That is unusual and worth knowing better. Zelda felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the summer sun. That is honest, she said. You asked for honest, Cade replied with a slight smile. Does it bother you? No, Zelda said after a moment. No, it does not bother me. As long as you are not expecting anything in return for your help. The only thing I expect is maybe another cup of that coffee you make, Cade said. And perhaps conversation while we work. Gets lonely out here sometimes, talking only to cattle and horses. Zelda laughed despite herself. I imagine it does. They rested through the hottest part of the afternoon, Cade dozing under a tree while Zelda worked inside the cabin on some mending she had brought from town. She had already started taking in small jobs from the women in Ogden, and her skilled work was beginning to earn her a reputation. The income was modest but steady, and every penny went toward supplies and improvements for the homestead. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they returned to work on the fence. The evening air was cooler, almost pleasant after the brutal heat of midday. They made good progress, and by the time darkness forced them to stop, they had set nearly 20 posts. Same time tomorrow. Cade asked as he prepared to leave, climbing onto his wagon. Same time, Zelda agreed. Thank you, Cade. This would have taken me weeks on my own. We are neighbors, Cade said, as if that explained everything. Sleep well, Miss Ramirez. Zelda, she said impulsively. You can call me Zelda. Cade smiled, and it transformed his weathered face, making him look younger and less guarded. Zelda then. And I am Cade, not Mr. Holloway. He drove off into the gathering dusk, and Zelda stood watching until the wagon disappeared into the darkness. She felt something stirring in her chest, a warmth and anticipation that both excited and frightened her. She had not come out here looking for romance, but she could not deny the connection she felt forming with Cade Holloway. The next 3 days passed in similar fashion. They worked hard during the cooler hours, talked during their breaks, and gradually learned more about each other. Cade told her about growing up on a small farm in Missouri, the youngest of 5 children, and how he had headed west after his parents died within months of each other. Zelda shared memories of her childhood in Santa Fe, her parents' little shop where her mother had taught her to sew, and the overwhelming grief of losing them both to the fever that swept through the city. It was like the whole world went dark, Zelda said on the 3rd day as they worked on the final section of fence. My aunt came and got me, brought me back to Utah with her. She was good to me, truly, but she never really understood that I did not want the life she had. She married for security, not love, and she assumed I would do the same. Did you love him? Cade asked. The banker's son? No, Zelda said immediately. I barely knew him. He was polite and proper and utterly boring. He talked about interest rates and property values the way some men talk about poetry or adventure. I kept thinking that if I married him, I would spend the rest of my life pretending to care about things that did not matter to me at all. Better to be alone than in bad company, Cade said. That is what I thought, Zelda agreed. Though my aunt said I was being unrealistic. She said love grows over time, that passion fades, but security remains. You believe that? Cade asked. Zelda paused in her work, considering. I think security matters, she said carefully. But I also think there has to be something more. Respect, certainly, shared interests, the ability to be yourself with someone instead of always performing. She looked at Cade. "Do you believe in love?" "I believe in connection," Cade said. "I have seen it with my parents. They genuinely liked each other, enjoyed each other's company. My father used to say that friendship was the foundation of any good marriage, that if you could not laugh together and talk together, you would not make it through the hard times." "That sounds wise," Zelda said. "He was a wise man," Cade agreed. "I miss him, miss both of them." They finished the fence line on the fourth day, just as Cade had predicted. The new post stood straight and solid, and they spent the afternoon stringing wire between them, creating a sturdy barrier that would hold against weather and wandering cattle. When the last wire was secured and tightened, they both stepped back to admire their work. "That is a fine fence," Cade said with satisfaction. "It is perfect," Zelda said, feeling a rush of accomplishment. "Thank you, Cade. I could not have done this without you." "You could have," Cade said. "It would have taken longer, but you would have managed. You are stubborn enough." Zelda laughed. "Is that a compliment or an insult?" "Depends on the context," Cade said with a grin. "Out here, stubbornness keeps you alive." They walked back to the cabin, and Zelda realized how comfortable she had become with Cade's presence over the past 4 days. She knew his rhythms now, the way he assessed a problem before tackling it, his dry sense of humor, the considerate way he treated her as a capable partner rather than someone fragile who needed protecting. "I should probably head back to my place," Cade said, though he did not sound particularly eager to leave. "Got chores that have been neglected while I have been over here." "Of course," Zelda said, feeling an unexpected pang of disappointment. "You have your own work to do." Cade hesitated, then said, "I meant what I said about helping with your barn roof. I've got some spare shingles, and it really should be done before the weather turns." "I cannot keep accepting your charity," Zelda said, though her heart was not in the protest. "Then do not think of it as charity," Cade said. "Think of it as me finding excuses to spend time with you." The words hung in the air between them, honest and direct. Zelda felt her breath catch. "Is that what you are doing?" she asked quietly. "Yes," Cade said, meeting her eyes. "If I am being too forward, tell me and I will apologize and leave you be. But these past few days have been the best I have had in a long time. You are smart and funny, and I like talking to you. I like working with you. I would like to keep doing both if you are amenable." Zelda's heart raced. "I am amenable," she said. "I have enjoyed this too, more than I expected to." Cade's face broke into that transformative smile again. "Then I will come back day after tomorrow with those shingles. Give us both a day to catch up on our own work first." "Day after tomorrow," Zelda agreed. Cade loaded his tools into the wagon, taking his time about it. When everything was secured, he climbed onto the bench and gathered the reins, then paused. "Zelda." "Yes, I am glad you bought this land," he said. "I am glad you are my neighbor." "I am glad too," Zelda said, and realized she meant it completely. She watched him drive away, her hand raised in farewell, and this time the warmth in her chest was undeniable. She was developing feelings for Cade Holloway, feelings that went beyond gratitude for his help or appreciation for his practical skills. She liked him, genuinely and deeply, in a way she had not liked anyone before. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying. The next day, Zelda threw herself into work, cleaning the cabin thoroughly, tending her small vegetable garden, and riding into Ogden to deliver finished mending work and pick up new projects. Several women in town remarked on how well she looked, how the outdoor life seemed to suit her. Mrs. Patterson at the general store asked if she was settling in well, and Zelda found herself mentioning Cade's help with the fence. "Cade Holloway," Mrs. Patterson said with an approving nod. "Good man, that one. Honest, hard worker, keeps his word. You could do worse for a neighbor." The woman's eyes sparkled with barely concealed matchmaking glee. Or for more than a neighbor if things were to develop that direction. Zelda felt her cheeks warm but did not deny the possibility. "He has been very kind," she said neutrally. "Kind and single," Mrs. Patterson said. "Not many decent single men around here, especially ones with their own land and good prospects. Mark my words, dear, if he is spending time helping you, he is interested." Zelda left the store with her cheeks still burning but her spirits high. She stopped by the land office to confirm some property boundaries, then headed back to her homestead, eager to return even though the cabin was small and rough compared to her aunt's comfortable house in town. Cade arrived 2 days later as promised, his wagon loaded with wooden shingles and roofing supplies. They spent the morning assessing the barn roof, which was in worse shape than Zelda had realized. Several sections had deteriorated completely, and rain had damaged some of the support beams. "This is going to take more than a day," Cade said, examining the structure carefully. "Maybe 3 or 4 to do it right. We need to replace some of these beams before we can put on new shingles." "I have lumber in the barn," Zelda said, left over from what the Morrisons had stored. They worked together to make the repairs, and the days fell into a comfortable pattern. Cade would arrive early, they would work through the morning, share lunch in the shade, rest during the heat, then work again in the evening. During their breaks, they talked about everything and nothing. Cade told her about the challenges of running cattle, the constant battle against weather and predators and market prices. Zelda shared her dreams of expanding her sewing business, maybe eventually opening a small shop in town. "You have got the skill for it," Cade said one afternoon as he watched her stitch a torn shirt with quick, precise movements. "Your work is better than anything I have seen." "My mother was an excellent teacher," Zelda said. "She believed that if something was worth doing, it was worth doing well." "Smart woman," Cade said. As they worked on the barn over the following days, Zelda became increasingly aware of Cade's presence in ways that had nothing to do with his practical help. She noticed the strength in his arms as he lifted heavy beams, the concentration on his face as he measured and cut wood, the gentleness in his hands when he reached to steady her as she climbed down from the roof. She caught him watching her sometimes too, his blue eyes thoughtful and warm. On the 6th day of working on the barn, as they were securing the last section of new shingles, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in from the west. The sky darkened to purple-black within minutes, and lightning cracked across the horizon. "We need to get down," Cade said urgently, helping Zelda descend the ladder as the first fat raindrops began to fall. They ran for the cabin just as the sky opened up, arriving breathless and laughing at the doorway. Rain pounded on the newly repaired barn roof, the sound loud even from a distance, and wind whipped through the yard. "Well, that timing could have been better," Cade said, water dripping from his hat brim. "Or worse," Zelda pointed out. "At least we got the last shingles secured before it hit." They stood in the doorway watching the storm, shoulder to shoulder in the small space. Thunder rumbled overhead, and lightning illuminated the landscape in brilliant flashes. Zelda was acutely aware of Cade's proximity, the warmth radiating from his body, the smell of rain and sawdust clinging to his clothes. "I should probably wait this out before heading home," Cade said, not moving away from her. "Probably wise," Zelda agreed, her mouth suddenly dry. Cade turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Zelda," he said quietly, almost questioning. She did not think, just acted on instinct and weeks of growing feelings. She rose on her toes and kissed him, brief and soft and terrifying in its boldness. When she pulled back, Cade's eyes were wide with surprise and something deeper, more profound. "I am sorry if that was too forward," Zelda started to say, but Cade shook his head. "Do not apologize," he said, his voice rough. "Please do not apologize." He cupped her face in his calloused hands and kissed her properly, deeply, with all the feeling that had been building between them over the past weeks. Zelda melted into him, her hands finding purchase on his shoulders, her world narrowing to the taste and feel of him. The storm raged outside, but inside the small cabin, everything was warm and bright and perfect. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cade rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for days," he admitted. "Only days?" Zelda asked with a shaky laugh. "I have been thinking about it since you first smiled at me." "That was days ago," Cade pointed out. "Exactly," Zelda said. They moved into the cabin properly, and Zelda busied herself making coffee while Cade added wood to the stove. The domestic intimacy of it felt natural, as if they had been doing this together for years rather than weeks. When the coffee was ready, they sat at her small table, hands intertwined across the worn wood surface. "I need you to know," Cade said seriously, "that I did not help you with the fence and the barn expecting anything in return. Not kisses, not anything." "I know," Zelda said. "That is part of why I kissed you. Because you helped without expectations. Because you treated me as an equal. Because you made me laugh and challenged me and saw me as a whole person, not just a woman who needed protecting or managing. You are quite possibly the least in need of managing of anyone I have ever met," Cade said with genuine affection. "You are determined and capable and infuriating sometimes with your stubbornness." "Look who is talking," Zelda retorted, but she was smiling. The storm passed within an hour, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of wet sage. Cade should have left then, should have headed back to his own ranch and his own responsibilities. Instead, he stayed for dinner, helping Zelda prepare a simple meal of beans and cornbread. They ate by lamplight as darkness fell, talking easily about nothing important and everything that mattered. When Cade finally did leave, well after full dark, he kissed Zelda again at the door, sweet and lingering and full of promise. "Can I come back tomorrow?" he asked. "Yes," Zelda said without hesitation. "Yes, please come back." "Good," Cade said, "because I was coming back anyway, but I wanted to be invited." She laughed and kissed him once more before watching him ride off into the darkness, his horse picking its way carefully across the moon-washed landscape. She stood in her doorway long after he disappeared from view, her heart full and her mind spinning with possibilities she had not allowed herself to consider when she first bought this land. Over the next weeks, Cade became a regular presence at Zelda's homestead. He would come by several times a week, sometimes to help with a project, sometimes just to share a meal and conversation. They worked together to prepare her property for winter, cutting and stacking firewood, banking earth around the foundation of the cabin, ensuring her spring house was properly insulated. In return, Zelda mended his clothes, which had suffered from years of bachelor carelessness, and helped him with accounts and correspondence that he found tedious. They were courting, though neither of them formally named it as such. It was a practical frontier courtship based on genuine affection and shared values, growing steadily deeper as they learned each other's habits and histories. Cade told her about his dreams of building the ranch into something substantial, maybe eventually buying more land and running sheep as well as cattle. Zelda confessed that she sometimes missed the social aspects of town life, the gatherings and conversations with other women. "Nothing stopping you from going to town for social events," Cade pointed out one evening as they sat on her porch watching the sunset. "In fact, there is a dance coming up in 2 weeks at the church social hall. I was thinking of asking if you would want to go with me. Are you asking now?" Zelda said, pleased. "I am asking now," Cade confirmed. Will you come to the dance with me, Zelda Ramirez, and let all of Ogden see that we are courting proper? I would be honored, Zelda said. The church dance was a major social event, drawing people from surrounding homesteads and ranches. Zelda borrowed her aunt's small mirror and took extra care with her appearance, wearing her best dress, a deep green calico that brought out the color of her eyes. Cade arrived in a wagon rather than on horseback, wearing clean pressed clothes and looking nervous in an endearing way. You look beautiful, he said when she opened the door, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush with pleasure. The social hall was crowded and warm, filled with music from a small band of fiddle, guitar, and accordion. People greeted Cade with friendly recognition and eyed Zelda with open curiosity. Several women approached her immediately, introducing themselves and asking about her homestead. Word had clearly spread about the newcomer who had taken on the Morrison place alone, and opinions ranged from admiring to skeptical. Cade stayed close to her side, his hand resting protectively at the small of her back, until she relaxed enough to enjoy herself. They danced together, and Zelda discovered that Cade was surprisingly graceful for such a tall man. He guided her through reels and waltzes with easy confidence, and when he smiled down at her during a slow dance, Zelda felt her heart swell with feelings she was not quite ready to name. During a break in the dancing, Zelda's aunt appeared, having heard that her niece was in attendance. Mary Ramirez was a handsome woman in her 50s, steel-haired and sharp-eyed, and she looked Cade over with the assessing gaze of someone evaluating his prospects and intentions. "So you are the rancher who has been helping Zelda," Mary said without preamble. "Yes, madam," Cade said respectfully. "Cade Holloway." "Mary Ramirez, Zelda's aunt," Mary said. "I understand you have been spending considerable time at her property." "I have been helping her get established," Cade said, meeting her gaze steadily, "being neighborly." "Is that all you are being?" Mary asked pointedly. "Aunt Mary," Zelda said warningly, but Cade squeezed her hand gently. "No, madam, that is not all," Cade said honestly. "I am courting your niece with her permission and encouragement. My intentions are honorable and my interest is genuine." Mary studied him for a long moment, then surprised them both by nodding. "Good. She deserves someone who sees her value and does not try to change her." She turned to Zelda. "You look happy, child, happier than I have seen you in years." "I am happy," Zelda said, surprised by her aunt's acceptance. "The homestead is hard work, but it is mine, and Cade has been wonderful." "Then I am glad I was wrong about you throwing away your future," Mary said. "Perhaps you found it instead." She looked at Cade again. "Take care of her." "I will," Cade promised, "though she is quite capable of taking care of herself." Mary actually smiled at that. "Then you understand her better than most. That is a good start." She patted Zelda's cheek affectionately and moved away to talk with other women. "That went better than expected," Zelda said, slightly stunned. "She loves you," Cade said simply. "She just wants to know you will be all right." They danced more, ate cake and drank punch, and talked with neighbors until late in the evening. By the time Cade drove Zelda home under a canopy of brilliant stars, she felt thoroughly integrated into the community in a way she had not been before. Being seen publicly with Cade had established her as more than just a strange woman living alone. She was Cade Holloway's girl, and that meant something in this place where reputation and connections mattered. At her door, Cade kissed her goodnight, then pulled back with a serious expression. "Zelda, I need to say something." "All right," Zelda said, suddenly nervous. "I know we have only been courting for a few weeks," Cade said. "And I know you came out here for independence, not to find a husband, but I need you to know that this is serious for me. What I feel for you is serious. I am not looking for something temporary or casual. I am looking for a partner, for someone to build a life with. Zelda's heart pounded. I am serious too, she said. I did not expect this when I bought this land. I was not looking for it. But I found you, or you found me, and I cannot imagine going back to how things were before. So we are on the same path then, Cade said, relief evident in his face. The same path, Zelda confirmed. He kissed her again, deeper and more passionate than before, and Zelda felt desire kindle hot and bright in her belly. But Cade pulled back before things could progress too far, ever the gentleman despite the hunger she could see in his eyes. I should let you get some sleep, he said roughly. I will see you day after tomorrow. I have got some cattle business tomorrow that I cannot postpone. Day after tomorrow, Zelda agreed, though she wanted him to stay, wanted to explore these feelings burning between them. But she also appreciated his restraint, his respect for propriety and her reputation. The next day passed slowly. Zelda worked on sewing projects and made repairs to her chicken coop, which had become home to 6 hens she had purchased in town. The routine tasks kept her hands busy, but left her mind free to wander, replaying moments with Cade, anticipating seeing him again. She was gathering eggs the following morning when she heard a horse approaching at speed. Looking up, she was surprised to see Cade riding hard, his paint horse lathered with sweat. Alarm shot through her. Something was wrong. Cade reined in his horse and dismounted quickly. Zelda, I need your help. What happened? She asked, setting down her egg basket. My top hand, Jimmy, got kicked by a horse yesterday evening. Cracked some ribs and maybe his shoulder. Doc Patterson came out last night and patched him up, but he needs to stay in bed for at least 2 weeks. Problem is, I have got to move 100 head of cattle from summer grazing to lower pasture before the weather turns, and I cannot do it alone. You need another hand, Zelda said, understanding immediately. I know it is not the kind of work you signed up for, Cade said apologetically. And I would hire someone from town, but everyone available is busy with their own harvests. I would not ask if I had any other option. When do we start? Zelda asked simply. Cade looked relieved. Really? You do not mind, Cade, you spent days helping me with my fence and barn, Zelda said. Of course I will help you. Besides, I should learn about cattle if I am going to be living out here. It will be hard work, Cade warned. Long days in the saddle, camping out overnight probably. I can handle hard work, Zelda said. Give me 10 minutes to change clothes and pack some things. She hurried inside and changed into her most practical clothes, canvas pants she had bought for ranch work and a sturdy cotton shirt. She packed a bedroll, extra clothes and supplies into a canvas bag, then grabbed her hat and gloves. When she emerged, Cade was waiting with her horse already saddled, a steady bay mare she had purchased a few weeks earlier. Thank you for this, Cade said as they mounted and started riding toward his ranch. I know it is above and beyond neighborly. We are more than neighbors now, Zelda pointed out. We are courting, remember? This is what people do for each other when they care. Still, Cade said, but he was smiling. They reached Cade's ranch an hour later, and Zelda got her first good look at what he had built. The house was solidly constructed of timber and stone, larger than her cabin with glass windows and a covered porch. The barn was substantial and well-maintained, with corrals and outbuildings arranged in practical order. It spoke of years of hard work and careful planning, and Zelda felt a surge of pride for what Cade had accomplished. His other hand, Pete, was a weathered man in his 50s who greeted Zelda with polite curiosity. Heard you were a seamstress, Miss Ramirez. Did not expect to see you signing on for a cattle drive. Life is full of surprises, Zelda said cheerfully. They spent the rest of the morning preparing, checking equipment and supplies. Cade showed Zelda how to use a lariat, how to guide cattle without spooking them, basic skills she would need. She was not an experienced rider by any means, but she was competent enough, and she learned quickly. They set out after lunch, riding north into the higher country where Cade had summer grazing rights on government land. The cattle were scattered across several miles of rangeland, and it took the rest of the day just to gather them into a manageable herd. Zelda quickly discovered that working cattle was exhausting, requiring constant attention and quick reactions. Her horse seemed to understand the work better than she did, responding to cattle movements almost instinctively. By nightfall, they had gathered about 70 head, and they made camp in a protected valley with water nearby. Pete cooked beans and bacon over the fire while Zelda tended the horses and Cade checked on the cattle, making sure none had wandered off in the darkness. Sitting by the fire, eating their simple meal, Zelda found herself enjoying the adventure despite her exhaustion. The night sky was magnificent, stars blazing in impossible profusion without any town lights to dim them. Coyotes yipped in the distance, and the cattle settled into quiet lowing and the occasional shuffle of movement. "You did good today," Cade said, sitting beside her. "Better than I expected for someone who never worked cattle before." "I have a good teacher," Zelda said, "and a smart horse." Pete chuckled from across the fire. "Smart horse helps considerably. That mare of yours has been working cattle longer than you have been alive, I would guess." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the crackling fire and distant cattle sounds the only noise. Eventually, Pete announced he was taking first watch and moved off to keep an eye on the herd. That left Zelda and Cade alone by the fire, a respectable distance between them for propriety's sake but close enough to talk quietly. "I like seeing you out here," Cade said. "You fit into this landscape." "I am covered in dust and exhausted," Zelda pointed out. "You are beautiful," Cade countered, "and you belong here. I knew it the first time I saw you working on that fence, determined and stubborn and refusing to give up." Zelda felt warmth spread through her chest. "I like being here with you. I like seeing your ranch, understanding more about your life and work." "Good," Cade said, "because I have been thinking about something and I want to know what you think." "What is it?" Zelda asked. Cade turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the firelight. "Your land and my land share a border. Together they make a good spread, big enough to support a substantial herd and crops besides. If we were to join our lands, combine our resources and efforts, we could build something really significant." Zelda's heart began to race. "Are you talking about a business arrangement?" "No," Cade said quietly. "I am talking about marriage. I am talking about building a life together, you and me, as equal partners. I know it is soon, but out here people do not have the luxury of long courtships. Winter is coming and I want you safe and provided for. I want to wake up next to you every morning and go to bed beside you every night. I want to build something lasting with you." Zelda stared at him, overwhelmed by the rush of emotion. "That is quite a proposal." "It is the truth," Cade said. "I love you, Zelda. I think I have loved you since you told me you could handle your own land and did not need my help. I want to marry you, but only if that is what you want too. I will not push or pressure. If you need time to think about it, I understand." "I do not need time," Zelda heard herself say. "Yes, yes, I will marry you." Cade's face broke into a brilliant smile. He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "You mean it? You are sure?" "I am sure," Zelda said, and she was. "I love you too, Cade. I did not expect to fall in love, but I did. You make me laugh, you challenge me, you respect me, and you see me as a whole person. Those are the things that matter. So yes, I will marry you." Cade pulled her into a kiss, deep and passionate and full of joy. When they finally broke apart, both of them were grinning like children. We should probably wait until after we get these cattle moved before we tell people, Cade said practically. Pete will be insufferable with teasing otherwise. Probably wise, Zelda agreed, though she wanted to shout the news to the stars themselves. They sat close together for the rest of the evening, talking about practical matters like where they would live and how to manage 2 properties. Cade suggested that Zelda could keep her cabin for her sewing business, making it into a proper workshop, while they lived in his larger house. Zelda liked that idea, the notion of having her own space for her work while also having a home to share with Cade. The next 3 days were hard work, gathering the remaining cattle and slowly moving the entire herd down to lower elevation pastures that would sustain them through winter. Zelda learned more about ranch work than she had imagined possible, and while she was sore and exhausted by the end of each day, she felt a deep satisfaction in the accomplishment. Pete figured out that something had changed between Zelda and Cade by the 2nd day, judging by the knowing looks he gave them, but he kept his comments to himself beyond a few amused smiles. When they finally got the last of the cattle settled in their winter range and returned to Cade's ranch, Pete simply tipped his hat to Zelda and said, "Welcome to the family, Miss Ramirez. About time Cade found someone worth keeping around." "That obvious?" Cade asked, not really bothered. "As obvious as a rooster in a hen house," Pete said with a grin. "But I approve for what it is worth. She works hard and does not complain. Those are good qualities in a ranch wife." After Pete headed to the bunkhouse, Cade turned to Zelda. "Speaking of which, we should probably talk to your aunt sooner rather than later, and I should speak to the pastor about posting the banns." "How long do we have to wait?" Zelda asked, suddenly impatient now that the decision was made. 3 weeks is traditional for the banns to be read, Cade said. "But given that it is already late September and winter is coming, I think Pastor Williams might be willing to expedite things if we ask. Maybe we could be married in 2 weeks. 2 weeks sounds perfect," Zelda said. They rode to Ogden the next day to speak with Zelda's aunt and make arrangements with the pastor. Mary Ramirez took the news of their engagement with equanimity, as if she had expected it all along. "I knew it when I saw you 2 together at the dance," Mary said. "You looked at each other the way people in love look, like the rest of the world had disappeared. When will the wedding be?" 2 weeks if Pastor Williams agrees," Cade said. "I know it is fast, but we see no reason to wait." "No reason at all," Mary agreed. "Zelda, you will need a proper dress." "Let me help with that, and we should plan a celebration after the ceremony, invite the community." "Nothing too elaborate," Zelda said, "just family and friends." "Of course," Mary said, but her eyes were already gleaming with plans. Pastor Williams agreed to perform the ceremony in 2 weeks' time, satisfied by Cade's reputation in the community and Zelda's obvious happiness. News of the engagement spread quickly through Ogden, and Zelda found herself receiving congratulations and well wishes from people she barely knew. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Zelda worked with her aunt to create a wedding dress, a simple but elegant design in cream-colored linen. She moved some of her possessions from her cabin to Cade's house, transforming one of the spare rooms into her sewing workshop. Cade worked on improving the house, adding small touches he thought Zelda would appreciate, ensuring everything was ready for her arrival as his wife. They saw each other daily, sometimes working together on practical preparations, sometimes just sitting and talking about their future. The physical attraction between them was a constant presence, but they maintained propriety out of respect for community standards and their own values. There would be time enough for passion after the wedding. The wedding day arrived cool and clear, the last day of September. The small church in Ogden was filled with neighbors and friends, all dressed in their Sunday best. Zelda wore her new cream dress and a crown of wildflowers that her aunt had helped her weave that morning. Cade wore a new suit purchased specially for the occasion, his dark hair neatly trimmed and his face clean-shaven. They stood before Pastor Williams and spoke their vows with steady voices and full hearts. When Cade placed a simple gold ring on Zelda's finger, she felt tears prick her eyes at the significance of the moment. This was real. She was becoming Cade's wife, and he was becoming her husband, and they were choosing each other freely and completely. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," Pastor Williams said with a warm smile. "Cade, you may kiss your bride." Cade did, sweetly and thoroughly, and the small congregation burst into applause. Zelda laughed against his lips, joy bubbling up irrepressibly. They were married. She was Zelda Holloway now, and the rightness of it resonated through her entire being. The celebration afterward was held at the church social hall, with tables laden with food contributed by various community members. There was music and dancing, and Zelda found herself embraced by women she barely knew, welcomed into their circle now that she was a married woman and part of the established community. Cade stayed close to her side, his hand frequently finding hers, his pride and happiness evident to everyone present. As evening approached, they made their excuses and departed amid good-natured teasing and well wishes. Cade drove the wagon toward his ranch, toward their home, and Zelda sat close beside him, her hand tucked in the crook of his arm. "Happy?" Cade asked as they left town behind. "Happier than I knew I could be," Zelda said honestly. "I came out here looking for independence and found so much more. I found you, I found purpose, I found home. We found each other," Cade corrected gently. "And we are going to build something amazing together, Zelda. I promise you that." "I know," Zelda said, believing it completely. Their wedding night was everything Zelda had hoped for, tender and passionate and deeply connecting. Cade was gentle with her inexperience, taking time to ensure her comfort and pleasure. When they finally came together fully, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Two people who loved each other expressing that love physically. Afterward, they lay tangled together in Cade's large bed, talking quietly in the darkness about their dreams and hopes for the future. The first months of marriage were an adjustment as they learned to share space and merge their lives. Zelda discovered that Cade snored slightly when he slept on his back, and that he preferred his coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in. Cade learned that Zelda was terrible at cooking breakfast but excellent at dinner, and that she liked to read in bed before sleeping. They had small disagreements about how to manage certain tasks, but they talked through them and found compromises that worked for both. Zelda continued her sewing business, working from the room Cade had helped her set up as a proper workshop. Word spread about the quality of her work, and she began receiving commissions from women throughout the county. The income was modest but steady, and Zelda took pride in contributing financially to their household. Winter arrived in November with heavy snows that blanketed the landscape and made travel difficult. They were largely confined to the ranch for weeks at a time, but Zelda found she did not mind. She and Cade worked together on indoor projects, maintained the livestock, and spent long evenings by the fire talking and planning. Pete had his own cabin on the property, but he often joined them for dinner, and Zelda enjoyed cooking for the three of them, creating a sense of family. In January, Zelda realized she was pregnant. The discovery filled her with a mixture of joy and trepidation. She had not expected it to happen so quickly, and she worried about the practical challenges of managing a baby alongside her other responsibilities. When she told Cade, his reaction dispelled her fears immediately. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Zelda asked. "I am thrilled," Cade said, pulling her into a careful embrace. "Scared too, if I am being honest, but mostly thrilled. You are going to be an amazing mother." "I hope so," Zelda said. "I have no idea what I am doing." "Neither do I," Cade admitted, "but we will figure it out together, same as we have figured out everything else." The pregnancy progressed without major complications, though Zelda found the summer heat particularly challenging in her condition. Cade was attentive and protective, taking on extra work so she could rest, ensuring she ate properly and did not overexert herself. The women of the community rallied around her too, offering advice and hand-me-down baby clothes and practical help as her due date approached. In late August of 1884, nearly a year after she had first arrived at the Morrison homestead, Zelda gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, but she was supported throughout by her Aunt Mary and two other experienced women from town. When the baby was finally placed in her arms, wrinkled and red-faced and perfect, Zelda wept with relief and overwhelming love. Cade was allowed in to meet his son shortly after, and the expression on his face as he held the tiny infant was something Zelda would treasure forever. "He is perfect," Cade said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are both perfect." They named him Thomas Holloway after Cade's father. Tommy, as they quickly began calling him, was a good baby, healthy and strong-lunged. Zelda threw herself into motherhood with the same determination she brought to everything else, learning to manage an infant while still maintaining her sewing business and contributing to ranch work when she could. The first year of Tommy's life passed in a blur of sleepless nights and small milestones. He grew quickly, a sturdy child with his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair. Watching Cade with their son filled Zelda with profound contentment. He was a patient, engaged father, not leaving all the childcare to her as some men did. He changed diapers, walked the floor with a crying baby, and sang lullabies in his rumbling voice that usually soothed Tommy to sleep. As Tommy approached his first birthday, Zelda and Cade began talking about expanding their family. "I would like more children," Zelda said one evening as they sat on their porch watching the sunset. Tommy was asleep inside, having exhausted himself playing in the yard. "Not right away perhaps, but eventually. I was an only child after my parents died and I always wished for siblings." "I would like that too," Cade agreed. "I came from a big family and I have good memories of having brothers and sisters around. Maybe we will try for a daughter next time." They were blessed with that wish. In the spring of 1886, Zelda gave birth to a daughter they named Emma. She had her mother's dark eyes and a head full of black curls, and she was adored by everyone who met her. Tommy, now almost 2, was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything from diaper changes to bottle feeding. Life settled into a rhythm of work and family. The ranch prospered under Cade's management and Zelda's practical assistance. They expanded their herd, bought more land, and built a larger barn. Zelda's sewing business continued to grow, and she eventually hired a young woman from town to help with the workload. They were not wealthy by any means, but they were comfortable and secure. Zelda's former cabin on the Morrison place became a storage building for ranch equipment, though sometimes she would walk over there and sit on the porch, remembering the woman she had been when she first arrived. That scared, determined girl who thought she needed to do everything alone seemed like a different person now. She had learned that accepting help was not weakness, that partnership was stronger than solitude, and that love was the most valuable thing she could build. On their 5th wedding anniversary in 1888, Cade surprised Zelda with a gift. He led her outside where a new sign hung over the ranch gate. It read, "Holloway Ranch, established 1877 by Cade Holloway, expanded 1883 with Zelda Ramirez Holloway. "I wanted to make sure everyone knows this is your ranch too," Cade said. "That you built this with me, that we are equal partners in everything." Zelda felt tears well in her eyes. After 5 years of marriage, Cade still found ways to show her how much he valued her. "Thank you," she said, standing on her toes to kiss him. "For this, for everything, for seeing me as a partner and not just a wife." "You have always been my partner," Cade said simply. "From that first day when you were trying to mend that broken fence and too proud to admit you needed help. I knew then you were special. I just had to convince you to let me be part of your life." "Best decision I ever made," Zelda said. They had 2 more children in the following years, another boy they named James and a girl they named Sarah. The house that had seemed too large for Cade alone now rang with the sounds of children's laughter and the organized chaos of a large family. Zelda juggled motherhood with her business and ranch responsibilities, and while it was exhausting, it was also deeply fulfilling. Tommy grew into a serious, thoughtful boy who loved working alongside his father with the cattle. Emma was bold and adventurous, always getting into mischief but charming her way out of trouble. James was gentle and artistic, preferring to draw pictures rather than work outside. Sarah, the baby, had everyone wrapped around her tiny finger with her infectious giggles and sweet nature. As the years passed and the children grew, Zelda sometimes thought about the choices that had brought her to this life. She had left her aunt's house seeking independence, determined to prove she could survive on her own. What she had found instead was that true strength came not from isolation but from connection. She had built a life richer and fuller than anything she could have imagined, not by rejecting help but by accepting it, not by standing alone but by standing alongside someone who loved and respected her completely. One autumn evening in 1895, 12 years after she had first bought the Morrison homestead, Zelda sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Tommy was 15 now, already as tall as his father and invaluable help with the ranch work. Emma was 13, learning sewing from her mother while dreaming of adventure. James was 10, filling notebooks with his detailed drawings. Sarah was 7, starting school in town and loving every minute. Cade came out and sat beside her, handing her a cup of coffee prepared just the way she liked it. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About that first fence," Zelda said with a smile. "How it all started because I was trying to mend fences on abandoned land, and you rode up and essentially told me to mend yours instead and stay for good." Cade laughed. "I was not quite that presumptuous." "Close enough," Zelda teased. "You definitely had intentions from the start." "Can you blame me?" Cade asked, slipping his arm around her shoulders. "You were the most interesting thing to happen around here in years. Beautiful, stubborn, determined to do everything yourself. I knew I wanted to be part of your life from the moment you told me you could handle your own land." "And now look at us," Zelda said, gesturing at the thriving ranch, the solid house, the sounds of their children playing inside. "We built all of this together." "We did," Cade agreed. "And we are not done yet. We have got years ahead of us watching these kids grow up, maybe grandchildren someday." "I look forward to all of it," Zelda said, leaning into her husband's warmth. "Every single moment." The sun dipped below the horizon, and stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the house, the children's voices rose in a familiar argument about whose turn it was to set the table for dinner. Zelda smiled at the sound. This was her life now, messy and loud and full of love. She had come to Utah seeking freedom and found instead a different kind of liberation. The kind that came from loving and being loved, from building something lasting with a partner who saw her as an equal. from creating a home and family that was entirely her own. She thought briefly of that younger version of herself, hammering at broken fence posts with more determination than skill, convinced that independence meant doing everything alone. If she could go back and tell that woman anything, it would be that accepting help was not weakness, that partnership could coexist with autonomy, and that sometimes the best things in life were the ones you never planned for but were brave enough to accept when they appeared. Cade stood and extended his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Holloway. Our children are probably destroying the kitchen trying to make dinner." "They take after their father," Zelda said with mock severity, taking his hand and letting him pull her to her feet. "They take after both of us," Cade corrected. "Stubborn, determined, and too independent for their own good sometimes." "And we love them for it," Zelda said. "We love them for it," Cade agreed. They walked inside together, hand in hand, ready to referee whatever chaos awaited them. This was their life, built on a foundation of respect, partnership, and deep, abiding love. It had started with a broken fence and a chance meeting, with an offer of help that Zelda had been too proud to accept at first, but wise enough to reconsider. Everything that followed, all the joy and challenge and growth, had stemmed from that single decision to let someone in, to accept partnership instead of insisting on isolation. The children swarmed them the moment they entered the kitchen. Tommy reporting that Emma had broken a plate, Emma insisting it was an accident, James showing off a drawing he had made, and Sarah demanding to be picked up. Zelda and Cade worked together to restore order, serving up dinner and settling everyone around the large table that had been built specifically to accommodate their growing family. As they ate together, trading stories about their day and making plans for tomorrow, Zelda felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. This was what she had been seeking when she bought that abandoned homestead, though she had not known it at the time. Not just independence, but purpose. Not just survival, but community. Not just a house, but a home filled with people she loved more than anything in the world. After dinner, after the children were finally in bed, and the house had settled into quiet, Zelda and Cade returned to their porch. It had become their ritual, this time together at the end of each day, sitting in comfortable silence or talking about whatever was on their minds. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage and distant pine forests. "You ever regret it?" Cade asked suddenly. "Giving up your independence, marrying me, having this life instead of the one you originally planned?" Zelda turned to look at him, seeing the genuine concern in his face. After 12 years of marriage, he still worried about her happiness, still wanted to make sure she did not feel trapped or limited. "I did not give up my independence," Zelda said firmly. "I chose to share it with you. That is completely different. I still make my own decisions, still run my business, still have my own thoughts and dreams. The difference is that now I have a partner who supports those things, who helps make them possible, who sees me as a whole person and not just a role to fill." She took his hand, threading their fingers together. "Cade, I have never regretted marrying you, not for one single moment. You gave me everything I was looking for and so much more that I did not know I wanted. This life, our children, this partnership we have built, it is better than anything I could have imagined when I was trying to fix that fence by myself." "I feel the same way," Cade said quietly. "You made my life complete. Before you, I had the ranch and my work, and that was fine. But it was not enough. You brought joy and purpose and meaning to everything. You made this place a home instead of just a house." They sat together in the darkness, comfortable in their shared silence, secure in their love. Inside the house, their children slept safely. Around them, the ranch they had built together stretched across the Utah landscape, solid and prosperous. Above them, the stars wheeled in their eternal patterns, marking time and bearing witness to the life being lived beneath them. This was their happily ever after, not perfect but real, not easy but worthwhile, built on hard work and mutual respect, and a love that had only deepened with time. It had started with a broken fence and a simple offer of help. It had grown into something beautiful and lasting, a testament to what could be built when two people chose to face life together rather than alone. And as Zelda sat there beside her husband, surrounded by everything they had created, she knew with absolute certainty that she had made the right choice all those years ago. She had come to Utah seeking independence and found instead something far more valuable: a true partnership, a family, and a love that would last the rest of their days. The wind whispered through the sage, carrying with it the promise of another day, another season, another year of life to be lived and enjoyed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new joys, but Zelda would face them as she faced everything now, not alone but alongside the man who had first offered to help mend her fences and had instead become her partner in mending a life together. And that made all the difference.